Hello everybody, my name is Alex Guerrero. I'm a missionary for Christ for the City International. I've been a missionary for practically going to 3 years now. I'm here in El Salvador. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My family immigrated from El Salvador to the United States, to California actually, when I was only 11 months. Practically, I grew up in California, in Los Angeles. Didn't have how can you say this? A nice life, but yeah, had a father that was a drug addict, alcoholic, gangs, involved in gangs. So practically, we lived in the streets for a while with my mother and my two brothers. My mother had us sleep in parks sometimes. She had us sleep in the park because my father she had welfare because of my two brothers that were born over there. But we had to sleep mostly in the parks because my father would waste the welfare money. In that time there were still food stamps. He would even take the food stamps away because there was a Chinese store where he can buy beer with the food stamps. So she would put us on a bench. She would lay on top of the bench and we would sleep under it, and she'll cover up the bench. We would sleep in the park, or sometimes there's like rockets and things like that where the kids climb up in the rockets and all that, and she'll take us up there to sleep in there so nobody can get close to us. So it was a hard life for us when we were young. We were actually in back of the supermarkets, Food for Less, Price Mart, things like that, digging in the trash cans for food, things that were already past due, that were expired, so we're getting that food to eat. Me and my brothers were getting tired of it, so what we did when we were growing up is going to the gas station, helping people pump their gas so we can get a couple of coins and take them home. Or we would go pick up cans. Sometimes we'll be in the corners of the supermarkets waiting for the people to come out with their carts, and we'll get the cart, help them push it to their car, and actually load up their bags so they can actually give us a couple coins, and then we go home all excited, telling Mom, here's some food. Get some food for us. For us, a dinner for us was, we were excited. We had tortillas and ketchup. We made it like it was a hot dog, even though it didn't have a wing in it. But ketchup and tortillas was the best thing for us. We thought it was the best. We would eat the tortillas with ketchup. And mine tastes real good. When my brothers would be joking around thinking it did have something in it, right? But it would just be tortillas with ketchup. As time went by, my father kept on, I don't know why my mother kept on forgiving my father. So time went by, he kept on doing the same thing. He ended up in prison. So I kept on seeing all this. Like they say, whatever the father does is what the son ends up doing at the end. And that was practically what I did, He was involved in gangs, but he never let me get close to them. He would tell his friends, I don't want my son close to here. So there was another gang around the corner, which they seen me grow up, and every time I would go to school, they were like, hey little man, come here, they'll pull me over and like, where you going? I'm going to school. Like, here's $1, here's $2, and I would be excited. But at the same time, when I would go to the school, I was always bullied. I was always getting picked on, getting that money taken away by other people. So practically, I got tired of it. I kept on hanging around with little groups, with gangs, but I wasn't actually involved. I was 13 years old when I was still hanging around with them, and I liked it. I didn't do it because, I had enemies. I wanted it. It was mostly important for me because it was to catch attention. Like saying they got girls, they got money. They're always in parties. So when I turned 14, actually, I did join the gang. And I wasn't actually jumped in the gang. I was known for, like what they say, putting in work. They let me walk in for everything I was doing. I was known for being a troublemaker. So they're like, nah, this guy, ain't no need to jump him in, just look at the way he is. So once I got in the gang, I felt like I was a big man. I was only 14 years old, but I was walking around the school putting my chest out saying, I'm a big man now, and nobody was picking on me anymore because they knew who I was walking around with now. As time went by, well, actually at the age of 14, I did go to juvenile hall. I did a robbery. That was my first time. I cried like a baby because I didn't know what juvenile hall was all about. So I cried to my mother like a baby, and she's like, I can't do anything about it. The judge sentenced you to a year, you're going to camp. So once I knew it was like a walk in the park, I didn't know how to fight. I had so many enemies I didn't know about. I was just growing up. All I did was do this for attention. I had people running my room all the time. It was like a thing, an everyday thing. People running in my room saying, they say you're sad boy and you're from such and such gang. I'm like, yeah, I'm your enemy. Let's fight. So I didn't even know what fighting was all about. I was always getting whooped on, like they say, because I didn't know what fighting was. But as time went by, I went learning what it was, how to fight. So I started doing the same thing, running in people's rooms saying, now I'm Mr. Sadboy, I'm here to do the same. And that's how I got so much respect in juvenile hall. I couldn't last, the most I lasted in the streets was 6 months. I would always violate my probation officer. So practically most of my life I lived it in jail. Once I turned 18, I went to prison. Once I got there, the main person that ran the whole prison came up to me and said, you know, I heard a lot about you, but this is the big time now, you know, you're not gonna run things like you want to run them. And he's like, I'm gonna keep you under my wing. So, you know, he kept me under his wing because I was new at it. I didn't know what prison was all about. Once, in that moment, I lasted like 3 months. There was about 3 months that passed by, and these people threw somebody, trying to kill somebody in prison, they threw him off the second tier, and he didn't die. This man still got up and started running to the police. So what I did is, like, I was just surprised looking at all this, and suddenly the main head comes up to me and tells me, here's this number, I want you to call this number. Because it's somebody, they're gonna come and pull me out right now. And it didn't take about 10 minutes when they had all the sheriffs in there, pulling all the people that were responsible for it. So I had no idea what I was doing. When I got the phone, I picked up the pay phone and I made a collect call, not knowing who I was calling. In prison, there's different types of groups that are there. You got the blacks, you got the whites, you got the Chinese people, and you got Hispanic people, which are, what's it called, just normal Hispanic people that are not involved, and Southerners, what are called sureños, that are all people that are in gangs. Gangs in prison are not allowed to fight each other. They gotta be united in case of something. So I was in that group called the Southerners. So when I called this number, I didn't know it belonged to somebody from the Mexican Mafia. When I called him, I said, look, I'm here, I'm calling because such and such person got rolled up right now. He got taken, he's gonna get a new case, he's gonna be taken out. So he said, you know, who are you? I'm Sad Boy from such and such gang. He's like, well, and the people here are waiting for you to choose somebody to be in charge of this whole prison. This man just straight threw the ball at me and said, well, if you have this number, it's because he had to trust you. So guess what, you're gonna keep the ball rolling. In that moment, I kept my mouth open all over the phone, and I was nervous, and like, you know, I'm only 18 years old, this is my first time here. You can't put me on this. He's like, you gotta obey orders here, you just don't discuss them, you obey them. And I knew if I told him, you know, I don't want to do this, I would end up dead. So I hanged up the phone, everybody turned around and looked at me, and all these older men were like, you know, they call veterans in prison, like, you know, what's going on? Like, you know, when I told them I was in charge, a lot of them didn't like it, and some of them helped me out and said, you're gonna run this place. To tell you the truth, there was a lot of things that in prison that I didn't like. Every time I had a visit from a woman I did not know. She would just come visit me, and over a glass window, she would put a list on the window and say, all right, all these people have an order to be killed. So you gotta make sure they're not in your prison. So I had to obey all that, you know. I had letters coming from other sectors of the penitentiary saying, we got such and such person here. And the only thing I could do is like, well, you guys know what you guys gotta do. I didn't put my life in front to do the work, right? Because practically they were not supposed to know who I was. So I can say that, you know, there was orders given by me, and practically I didn't feel comfortable about it because I didn't know who these people were. I didn't know what they had done. It was just something that came to me and said, these people, they got green lights, they gotta be killed. So in prison, you can't show weakness. Once I got to the point where I was just tired of this, I started asking God, you know, I don't want this, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, after a 15-year sentence, I only did a year and a half. You know, I was tired of it. I said I couldn't. I knew people would tell me, look, I'm Christian. I hear people say Christian. I didn't like, you know, what is a Christian? You know, I would always run to the Catholic church, but I didn't go to listen to any, preaching or anything like that. I would go to see other people or see the other people I had in charge of other places. And like, you know, had them report themselves, like, what's going on? What's going on over here? What's going on in Sector 2? What's going on in Sector 3? So, in that moment, you know, one man came up to me and said, I'm the person you're looking for on that list, the person they want dead. And I look at him and say, what you do? He's like, well, they confused me because of this and this and that. I'm like, but I'm Christian now. I'm not involved in anything. I'm Christian. And I asked him, what is a Christian? What is that? He's like, I follow Jesus. And I'm like, who is this Jesus? He's like, it's somebody that died for you and me. But if I gotta die, you can go ahead and kill me. And something touched me in my heart, and I told him, get your stuff and tell the sheriffs you can't live in this prison. Please, we never had this talk. I don't want to end up dead because I let you go. So please, we never had this talk, just go. He left. After that moment, I kept on saying, oh, who's this Jesus? I would grab a Bible, but I would never read it. I would use it as people would think it's like something to protect yourself, right? I'm going to use this Bible because that's going to protect me. So I seen the Bibles that way. So when that year and a half came and they said I was released, I kept on looking at everybody and like, no, this can't be happening. This is not true. I'll be back, don't worry, they're gonna see that as a mistake and they're gonna send me right back in. So when I walked out, I was actually free, but I was not free completely because I was getting transferred to immigration. And I went to a federal prison where now I had to see a federal judge because of my immigration problem. Once the judge came up to me and they started telling me, like, you're here because you're scared to go back to your country. You came because of the war, right? I'm like, I'm thinking like, I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, I'm scared to go back, you know? Just to see. I was thinking in my head, like, he's gonna let me go free. So, yeah, I'm scared to go back, sure. I can't go back to El Salvador. I don't even know that country. So the judge said, okay, well, what you can do is spend 7 years here in a federal prison, and then we'll let you out. And I was like, hold on, you want me to spend 7 years here still so you can let me go free? So what I did voluntarily is I voluntarily asked to be deported because I don't want to be in prison anymore. So I signed papers And I was going around the federal prison asking people, how long, Salvadorian people, how long have you been waiting for the plane? Oh man, I've been here for 6 months waiting to get a seat on that plane so they can send me out. So I'm getting comfortable in this place. Like, well, I'm gonna sit here for a couple months to get a seat on the airplane. It didn't take 2 days when the consul just came up to me and said, "Call your family, tell them bring your suitcase. You're leaving the next day." So I didn't last not even 3 days in that place. They practically didn't want me in that country, or it was God doing His work. Well, I got deported to El Salvador. I started doing a lot of bad things here because I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going to go back right away, but my family didn't have the money to take me back over there, right? So I was like, I was worried. I was stressing all over the streets, moving from one side to another. I started stealing here. I started hanging around with gang members here, like, just to hang around and try to do some stealing with them, extortioning people. I started doing a lot of bad things here. I seen things happen here in this country, which me as a gang member, I never seen in the United States, right? When I started being with this group here in El Salvador, they started doing all this, like, what do you call it? This chopping up people, right? And I wasn't feeling well with that. I was like, we don't do this in the States. These people were picking on innocent people just because you live in the wrong community, just because you're selling ice cream or you're selling anything in the streets. They want to just take your money, or like we don't do that in the States, So I didn't feel comfortable. I kept on not feeling comfortable. I tried to stay away. And I started hearing the word of Jesus again. I started hearing about the word of God. People kept on coming to my house, hey, God loves you. You got to come to church. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm good. No, I don't. I'm good. Until one time this man, I love this brother. His name is Pastor Walter. He said, God's going to deal with you. God's going to deal with you, so you better come. He told me to tell you. I'm like, I started getting nervous. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to church. I don't know what you're talking about, but I felt like heaviness over me. And like, I started going to church. That first time I went to church, somebody in the back starts talking in different languages. And he starts telling my whole life. And I'm over here all nervous trying to turn around to see who's doing this, who's playing this game, I didn't know it was the Holy Spirit at that time, right? So I'm like, who's playing this game? I'm wanting to turn around to see who it is. And I couldn't turn around. And in that moment, they told me they're going to want to harm you, but I'm not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to do anything because I'm protecting you. I'm like, but who wants to harm me? So one time I was an ice cream seller, and I went selling ice cream to a different territory. And I noticed there was 2 gang members there. And every time I seen the gang members, they always asked me for ice cream. I always let them have it because I'm like, I'm not going to charge them because they're going to want to kill me. So, I seen so strange that moment that these guys came up to me and said, hey, can you give us an ice cream? Yeah, sure. And I put the box down to give them the ice cream. And I seen that one turn around like if it was used the bathroom or something right in the street, right? And I was looking at the floor and I felt like something was wrong. And the other one was pulling out money. I'm like, this guy's never paid me. Something's wrong here. So once this guy turns around, he puts a gun in my head. When he put the gun in my head, he kept on pulling the trigger. And the gun wouldn't go off. And that moment I see my whole life pass by. I thought it was a joke. I see it in movies, but once I just opened and closed my eyes in that moment, I just see my whole life pass by, and I said, everything's over. It's done with. There's nothing to do. So he kept on pulling the trigger and the gun wouldn't shoot. So the other one started holding my arms and telling him, hurry up, kill him. Hurry up and kill him, And he kept on telling him, wait, doesn't want to shoot. So I loosened I loosened up from the guy that was holding my arms. I pushed him away, and then I started fighting with the one that had the gun, but he wouldn't let the gun go. So practically I kicked him in the stomach and I started running. Well, I was probably like around 5 houses away when the gun started going off. It just started shooting, and I was zigzagging through the whole street. Then when I got back to church, because I was all nervous, I went straight running to church. I remember what God had told me, that they're going to want to harm you and they're not going to be able to. So I started going to church and saying, I'm going to listen to this man. I'm going to listen to this man, but it only lasted a week. And I didn't listen. I started getting in trouble again. I started extortioning again. I couldn't go out and sell anything because I'm like, these guys already want to kill me, so I can't go out. I started doing the same thing. I ended up in prison here. And practically, that's where I got close to God. I'm not going to say once I got in prison, I was still lost in drugs, alcohol. I was like, I'm going to do this to pass time. I was sentenced to only 4 years, but it felt like eternity. So I'm like, I spent totally in my life, I spent 11 years of my life just behind bars. And I kept on feeling like it was just eternity. And I started, one time I was all drugged out. I walked down and I see these women that were preaching in the corner. I wasn't interested in preaching. I was interested because there were women. I'm like, whoa, what are these women doing in prison? And I was like, oh, some of these look sexy, So I got on the little wall just to try to take a look. I was without a shirt and everything, And I turned around and looked. And that lady that was preaching just suddenly turned around and looked at me and pointed her finger at me and said, God's going to use you. You just can't imagine how. And I'm over here like, I want to get out of here, But I couldn't. I just started shedding tears in that moment. And she kept on going at it against me like, if God said this, this, and that. Once she finished and started praying for everybody, I just got down and started walking the soccer field they had inside prison. And I kept on going around and around the soccer field thinking about it, and God keeps on telling me he's going to use me. Why? Why? Suddenly the pastors that were inside the prison kept on visiting my cell, kept on telling me, no, let's go. Remember what the sister said. Remember this. That day, these pastors came up to me. I was so drugged out, and I was drunk, and I kept on looking up at the sky and telling God, I'm tired of my life. I'm tired. I don't want this anymore. In that moment, then pastors walked in the cell and said, let's go to church. Remember, how am I going to go to church? I'm drunk. I'm high. I can't. Let's go. God will do something with you. So that moment I went over there. They preached. I started crying. And ever since that moment, God started working in my life. It wasn't easy, It was, I would still get drunk, or I would still use a cigarette after I go to church. But after a while, all that started going away. And suddenly, what helped me out the most is that the sister came back, and she tells me, the pastors here say that you know English. Would you like to give English classes here in prison? I'm like, well, yeah, let's play the little school. It doesn't matter, Probably help me pass time. So we started putting all these flyers on the walls, and whoever wants to get English classes, I'm thinking in my head, ain't nobody gonna show up. Who wants to learn English? Ain't nobody wants to learn English. Well, let me tell you this way. My first class was of 265 students. I didn't know how to fit them in that little church. I was nervous because in that place, there's no tomatoes or onions they can toss at you. There was only big old swords, guns, bricks, and everything. And I was nervous, and I was like, oh, I get confused. These people are gonna want to kill me. These people are gonna want to do this. But no, God did something in that moment when I started even teaching them just the alphabet. I had all these people, like, you can have murderers, rapists, thieves. You had all these kinds of people sitting there watching me and raising up their hand saying, "Teacher, can you repeat that one again?" And that would just, my skin would get all goosebumped and like, these guys really want to learn. And that's when God started touching my heart and said, "You're going to be doing something for me." So I did graduate. We did the English program. It became a program where actually it helped the inmate get out of prison earlier. And I ended up with 12 teachers inside prison. We had, in the whole sector, we had different groups. I became the coordinator of the whole prison, of all the churches. People kept on telling me, "You're going to be a good pastor when you get out. You're going to be a good pastor when you're," and I'm like, I don't want to be a pastor. And I kept on going, nope. So I kept on praying to God and telling God, I don't want to be a pastor. I love money, and I don't want to be like these pastors that are doing this just for the money, just because they want, all these offerings and all that. I don't want this. Make me a missionary. I'd rather die. I kept on telling God, pastors laugh when I tell them that, right? I'd rather die instead of being a pastor. So I kept on praying to God, telling him, make me a missionary. Send me to Africa, send me wherever you want. But I'd rather die because of your name. Well, one day, I knew all the events that were going on in prison. When there was churches coming from the Freedom to come and do an event, I knew all about it because I was the coordinator. But suddenly this one time they started screaming out my last name. Guerrero, Guerrero, and I'm like sitting in my hammock on my bed. Because you put a hammock on the roof and you just move from one side to another. And I'm over here on my cell phone. I'm not gonna lie, I was on Facebook. Inside prison, I was on my Facebook, and these people start screaming like, there's gringos down there. There's gringos and there's black people down there. I'm like, yeah, they need you. They need somebody that speaks English. I'm like, there's all the teachers down there. Tell them to go. No, you're the coordinator. I'm like, and there she was, this one lady called Barbara Rowe, which was there with a couple African Americans from the anointed ex-offenders. Suddenly I go down there and I met them. And we're gonna do this event, we're gonna evangelize. And I'm like, why didn't you guys tell me? They came by surprise. It was something real quick. So they did their event. They did the campaign. They did everything. And Barbara gave me her number. And we kept in contact. We talked all the time on the phone. And one day it came from her, and she said, like, "You ever thought about being a missionary?" I'm like, "Thank you, Lord." God responded at that moment when I kept on telling him I wanted to be a missionary. He's like, she came and said, "You ever thought about being a missionary?" I'm like, I look up at the sky and I tell God, "Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing." So all this time I was frustrated to get out of prison. I'm like, everything's perfect, everything's planned. I wanted to get out. There was people out in the street that wanted me dead. But I kept on telling myself, they ain't gonna kill me, they ain't gonna kill me. So, it was time for my court day, and these court days were getting suspended all the time. And I kept on getting frustrated with God. I would walk around the soccer field and I was like, what am I doing wrong? You have everything planned for me already. I'm gonna become a missionary, I'm gonna do this. Why ain't you letting me free? Well, days after, I knew that one of the neighbors wanted me dead and he was waiting for me to get out. So I kept on praying for him and to tell God, I never wanted to tell people in the past I was probably like, I want that person dead. But this time it was like totally different. I told God, bless him with a nice house. Bless him with a huge house where he can give him a lot of money, where he can leave and I won't see him again. but it was not God's will. A couple days later, this person had got killed. So I kept on walking around telling God, let's do this. Now I'm ready to go to court. I'm ready to get out. I'm not going to tell you that inside prison being Christian is easy. People kept on picking on me, like, yeah, doing this because you don't want to last your 4 years that you have, You're a chicken and this and that. There was this one time where it was close to getting out, and this person just comes up to me, and I'm sitting here, I'm sitting on the ground eating my food because there was no chairs, right? So I'm sitting there, and the bathroom was on one side. This person goes, uses the bathroom, he washes his hands, and he just starts swinging his hands, and all the water starts sprinkling in my face and my food. And he looks at me and says, "What? You're Christian, you ain't gonna do nothing." So in that moment I got up, and I was I just balled my fist and said, "I'm taking off on this person." So I was already mad because, I kept on going to court. They kept on suspending my court date. So I'm like, no, I'm letting the old man out. I'm taking off on this person. When I tried to do it, my feet felt so heavy I couldn't move. I couldn't move at all. So I turned back around the other way, and I went down to church, and I started crying like a baby. But I mean like a straight baby. I just started crying on the ground on my knees and started telling God, why? Why do I gotta support these people? Why do I gotta stand all this? People doing this, pushing me around just because I have a Bible under my arm. They think they can see me less. In that moment, there was a voice that came straight to my ear. And that voice told me, I was whooped on, I was spit on, and I was put on a cross for all you people. And you cannot stand this little bit for me. In that moment, just how I have goosebumps right now, all over my body, I start crying even more like a baby, and I told God, now I understand. I understand everything. Thank you for opening my eyes. So I kept on going around, walking, always a soccer field, thinking about my freedom. When I knew I couldn't go back where I lived at, where my wife was living at. So I kept on telling God, where am I going to go? Where am I going to live at? Where am I going to go to? And there's this lady again. And every time we talked on the phone, she's like, "You know where you're going?" Like, "No." "Well, you're coming home to live with me." And there goes Barbara again telling me she was taking me home. She's like, "You're going to live here with me." I'm like, "Are you serious?" "Yeah, look, I'm going to prepare your room." And she was always sending me pictures of how she painted the room. You're like, "Look, you like this color? You like this color?" I'm like, oh my God. And I knew God had it all in his hands. And I thank God for everything. Once that happened, suddenly I had a court day again. We prayed in that moment. She was there, my wife was there. We started praying that day we were at court. This judge in that moment was just throwing fire at me like, "I'm not letting you out," and this and that. And suddenly something happened at the last minute and said, "All right, you better complete your probation. You better do this and this and that." It was funny. It's funny because at the moment before the court started, I had to use the bathroom. I couldn't stand it. And when this lady starts going at it in the courtroom for about an hour, I was looking at the deputy and said, "Look, just send me back to prison. I gotta go to the bathroom before I pee here in the chair." I kept on telling him. He knew how strict the judge was. She's like, "I'm not moving you from there. Tell her. I'm not gonna tell her. Look at the way she's just going at it." And I was just asking God in that moment, please do something here, God. I'm gonna end up peeing in this chair. You want to send me back? Send me back. But I'm gonna end up peeing in this chair. I couldn't last no more. I couldn't last any longer when that lady said, "You're free to go." So I thank God for everything. There was a lot of things that I didn't explain in this video, right? But So many things that happened in my life, and now this is where God has me at. Now this is what I'm doing. Every time I see kids in the street, now I see these gang members, I try to tell them, it's not a right, correct life you're choosing. You know, I can't have somebody come up to me and tell me, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't understand me. Well, I've been through worse things. Don't tell me I don't know what you're going through. I've been through it all. I've been in the garbage cans, I've been in the streets, I've been on drugs, I've been on alcohol. I've done drugs that don't exist here in El Salvador. In the States, there's so many drugs, they don't exist here. So don't tell me you don't know, that I don't know what you're going through. So that's what I do now, is now I try to work with people in prison, because God put that in my heart. I see the needs inside prison when I was in there. And that's the reason why I work in this prison ministry, trying to help these people understand that there is somebody that loves them. That there is somebody, when you less think that nobody cares about you, there is somebody that cares. And his name is Jesus.